So this is our third video with Mr. Philippe, and we've looked at compelling case of creativity. We've looked at some ideas of how to start being creative. And we closed the last one really saying, this is the $1,000,000 question. I know when we first talked, that's what you said, the $1,000,000 question, right? Which of those creative ideas do you bring to life? Because from a business sense, I'm talking here, like personally, you can bring any creative idea to life. You put it on the wall or whatever, but commercially, that really is the question. So how do you start untangling that one, monsieur?
Well, that's exactly what you said. That's definitely the $1,000,000 question. That's the toughest one to crack, I would say. There are still a couple of things you can have a look at. One is assessing an idea and then trying to assess as soon as possible what I call the market fit. Mm-hmm. And the market fit is, there are different layers in that space, but one of the layers is very simple, is that do we have a market for that idea? Plain and simple. And if we have a market, what is that market exactly, and trying to define that. So you don't design a product for entry level the same way you design a product for luxury. It's different market, different type of product, different price points and everything, and also different volumes. So the market fit will tell you relatively quickly if your idea have legs in terms of commercial success. So that's one way to filter your creative output.
So in some ways, this ties into a tip you shared in one of the prior videos, which is the last video actually, which was, what's the one tip? The question, right? And the right question.
Yes.
And that kind of fits in here too, really, because it's what are the best questions to ask in terms of market fit?
Yes.
It's the same question, right? It's a different slant, but you're now getting really critical to the meaty end of what's the market fit questions. And that's never going to be one. You might have a pool of them, or you might have a bunch of different considerations.
Exactly. Yeah. And that market fit is fundamental, and very often it's kind of left maybe a bit too late into the process. Mm-hmm. So people tend still to continue to develop the idea on the product, mm-hmm. and don't question the market fit soon enough, which means that you waste a bit of time and efficiency there. Mm-hmm. But there are ways to either talk about the pain points you've been observing, mm-hmm. or the solution that you have without sharing exactly what it is. Yeah. But with the conversation you can have, and both physical and online, you have a sense if the idea has legs or not, and where and which market it's going to resonate with.
Yeah, got it. So I'll talk to this one a bit different. I'm going to talk to this. I'll give an example from my field of behavior. I'll link it to sales again. I remember when I started becoming accredited and going through methodologies, and something that stood out to me, and this is going back, you've got to think 20 years. I'm not talking 2 years ago, I'm talking 20 years ago. There are some well-known sales methods such as spin selling, solution selling, and all this sort of stuff. But even back then, 2 decades ago, I looked at these and I'm looking at the practicalities. And what leapt out to me was there's a pattern here, and it's to do with people and behavior. And at some point, you're going to start hearing about models that are behavioral selling. And so I deliberately started building and labeling back then even. And now that's exactly where we're at right now. You can, so I'm going to talk to this from a, how do you know what to bring to life? I think you've got to almost measure and look what's going on now, but think about future and look at those trends or patterns that go into the future. Yeah. I was recently at Pause Fest, and I forget, I'll maybe add it in the notes when we do the video, but I remember hearing one of the speakers who described a specific thing. He's an investor, an angel investor, and he was saying his kind of the same thing, but he reverses it. If you look at any industry right now, if you look at it now and look backwards, mm-hmm. 15 years, you start to see some obvious things now that were actually obvious then. Correct. If you looked at the right thing. And it's kind of the same thing. You can look forwards and backwards, yeah. with a filter of these patterns. And I think that's a great starting point to start to hone in on all these ideas. Which ones do we think are going to have the most legs for the longevity? You know what? Yeah, you know what? There's trends, there's trending, there's some things you can do that are short term. But I'm a big believer in longer term thinking over the short term anyway.
Definitely. And I definitely would agree with your point of looking at trends and patterns. And that's very, very important. In any business, there will be long trends and shorter trends and patterns. You have that in fashion and everything. You have the 15-year trend and or pattern, and then the cycle of 3 months, shorter patterns too. Very important to look at that. If you're in business and you're the CEO and you need vision, you need to look at the longer trends, the long wave patterns, and see how your new ideas can fit into that. And that's where sometimes having futurists presenting to your board can be really an asset. And it's not so much because they predict the future, because they have their
nobody knows that it's the future is
exactly. It's very interesting because if you invite like 5 different futurists to your board meeting, there will be a common thread, a common trend that they will all probably play out. And you need to hear that, and you need to make sure that your business vision in 5 and 10 years is aligned to that trend, so that you can serve that way. At the same time, you don't have to accept that for what it is. If you think, if you have the gut feeling or you have the data that your business is going to a different direction, you also need to follow that direction. And then you need to test the product and services and the market at the same time and see which one resonates, so that you're ready for any options.
Yeah, I think adding to that, advice from futurists 100%. If I link that back to people, not so much the label of futurists, I would say more the skill set of the individual. Whoever this is, whether they're futurists, whatever, they've got to be credible, and they've got to have a different mindset, because what it takes to birth a creative idea is different than what it takes to take it to market, which is something we know we're going to come back to when we do the 4th video for sure, which is the execution. It's the same thing. But even that, looking at trends, some people are better at looking at trends and analyzing markets than they are birthing the ideas. So really be selective with who those futurists are, and but the right multiple people. If you go to 10 people, you're likely to get 10 different inputs, and that could be more confusing than clearing.
Yes, sometimes there are first principles trends that you can identify, like the mega trend or something. The other thing is that sometimes the futurists are inside your organization.
Yes.
There are the people inside, and they have an idea of what the future they want to have, and the future they foresee. And sometimes it's not very creative, but sometimes it's very creative. Yeah. And having this input can also really help your company and set the direction.
Nice. Now, I know when we talk about this one, we plan to see, we said we're going to talk about how do you bring it to life. You referenced quickly, we didn't actually talk about it, but you said there's an example with Nokia. Could you share that with us now, please, Philippe, maybe?
Definitely. I remember that time, so that was maybe 11, 12 years ago, where the Nokia design team released their vision of the future. And that was kind of a kind of secret thing that they were publishing, probably for PR reason or something, but it doesn't matter. So you remember the old Nokia, they had a small screen, the battery will last, 7 or 9 days or 10 days. And you have this menu, a bit like, the Windows thing by folders and everything. And then they released this kind of new design idea that will unfold in the next 20 years, which was a screen in your forearm. And then you have probably some headset or something.
Wow.
And maybe 4 weeks later, the iPhone was out. And I was like, guys, you had all the resources, you probably had the technology back then, and you completely missed the boat.
And what, they missed the boat because what was the thing that made them miss the boat in that instance, do you think?
Well, I think it's what I said in the first video or the second one, I can't remember, is that efficiency.
Yeah.
So you have the creative, so they decided that you did pivot to the mobile industry, which was a very good move. But then they created that idea and that product and services, ecosystem, and then they had the efficiency. And so they grew bigger and bigger, and they got very good at doing what they do, but I think they kind of forgot what was the creative principles again.
Yeah.
And because you're stuck in efficiency, then you push away the creative principles, which you had. I mean, that was mind-blowing for me at the time. It's like, they had the creative output.
They could have led the charge, is what you're saying. I've seen that in many other industries as well. I've seen it in print to digital media and advertising, the same pattern. Great example. The thing that springs to mind for me here is Todd Sampson's Redesign Your Brain, which I love. It's a great series, and he's done a few now, Body Hack and all the rest. But I know that there was always a model, because he did this piece on creativity, and the guy got him making this silly little engineering creative device of how to get it moving. And from an engineer, you might even understand this model. He talked about 4 stages of how do you bring it to life, which ones to bring to life. And it was kind of 4 questions or 4 measures. Is it relevant to the market for those needs? That's back to the questions you said. Is it novel or unconventional? So that aspect, because that's where, and I would say there, not everything creative or innovative is disruptive, but everything creative or innovative has merit, right? So they're talking from that commercial thing to really get ahead of the curve. Novelty and unconventionality along with relevance is kind of quite key to that. Is there also what they would say a genesis, meaning next level of evolution? Now that's where I think you're stepping into this world of not just creative innovation, but disruptive, right? Genesis, big leap forward. That's the kind of a third piece. And the fourth one though is elegance, is what they say. Is it finished, right? So relevance, novel, genesis, and elegance. And those 4 kind of considerations, if you can hone in with the different ideas you've got, which ones are the ones that are kind of closest to, and that's just another way to look at it, maybe, for which ones to bring to life.
It's a great framework.
Yeah, I know, it just always stood out for me because it's I like the simple, as we do, right? That's something that, as a designer, I'm sure you would agree, the best creativity is often the simplest. Don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah, definitely. And getting to the simple solution, that's often tough work.
Yeah, perfect. So again, let's wrap this one, and we've got some great examples, some good stories. So hone in on one thing to answer that $1 million question. If you really got to get better at one thing as an individual, as a small business, or as a business, to hone in on which ones to bring to life. What's the one core thing to remember from this, Philippe?
For me, that would be to test the market fit as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And it could be at the stage of the pain point you have identified. Is that pain point really relevant and experienced by our audience?
Yeah. And I think from this one, we've been singing from the same song sheet or hymn sheet, is how they say it. I would say exactly that. You've got to, my one thing is learn to get very honest with yourself as an individual, as a business, to be self-reflective and understand that you've got to learn to filter. The longest journey is from the head to the heart, right? It's from the mind of the idea to the heart. You've got to get very honest with being real with which of these are the ideas to bring to life. And it's coming back to some of the points we covered. Just get very honed in on identifying what that is. Beautiful. Thanks again, Philippe. That's the third one, Dan. We've got one more discussion, so we'll come back for that, and that is the execution one. So let's talk about that in a minute.